Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and start.
Oakland.
We'll go ahead and start the meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Right. We got them.
Just for a quick update, number 2 has been scratched on our agenda for the evening. Go ahead with number 1 on the agenda. Consider approving the minutes held from July 17th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes and sign the warrant.
Second.
Motion made second. All in favor? American Legion is number 3. American Legion left permission to hold a toll booth on Church Street.
I'm going to actually turn the floor right over to them so they can chat with us about it.
Pardon?
I said I'm going to turn the floor right over to you, sir, so you can chat with us about it. Did you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Okay, we're going to turn the floor over to you so you can chat with the council about what you're requesting.
Okay, what we're requesting is, we want to set up a voluntary toll booth on Church Street. On, what was the date again?
Maybe on Memorial Weekend on the
Memorial
Saturday.
Weekend on a Saturday.
Labor Day. Labor Day weekend, I'm sorry.
You're a little late there.
Yeah.
Very early.
The people that are going to conduct it will be the Sons of the American Legion, and they will not take any space in the center of the street. It'll be on each side. Approximately, what, 5 hours?
It's usually 4 to 5 hours. It's not really set. It depends on how it's going or.
This is a big fundraiser. We have 2 giant fundraisers. This is one of them. It can produce anywhere from $900 to $1,400 in a short span. There's a lot of people that are sympathetic to the American Legion, and we look forward to having this event.
Let me, if I may, I just want to explain the process. They brought in their proof of insurance. They shared their details and plans with the police chief. And the third step would be getting permission from the council for them to hold this event. We've discussed it with MMA, with the fire station. There's some processes that we go through, and they've followed everything that we've asked them on my side.
Did you say it was Memorial Weekend next year? You're talking?
No, Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day.
It's coming to
Labor Day.
I'm sorry, Labor Day.
He did say before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I like Memorial Weekend. Beginning of the summer.
On the agenda, the agenda said toll booth, is that?
Well, that's what they're
Your words.
generally referred to. It's not going to be a toll booth. It's going to be, they're not going to stop traffic.
So if somebody does not want to stop, they don't
They
have
just
to
keep
stop.
going.
Go right there.
Exactly, exactly. It's a completely voluntary thing. Most people will stop. We have a lot of citizens that are sympathetic with the Legion.
I think it's a fine thing. Toll booth scares me because I envision stopping people. And I don't like that no matter who it is, but I think the Legion certainly is a wonderful organization and
And I'm sure
deserves a
that,
chance to raise some money.
I'm sure there'll be a few drivers that are gonna be a little antsy. They don't understand the American Legion, and they may complain, but hey, shame on them.
I'd make a motion, we grant the Legion permission to do this.
Motion's been made. Do we have a second? Second, thank you. All in favor?
I have a
Question, Don, sorry.
Have we done this before?
They used to do this quite often, actually. It's been a few years, hasn't it?
We didn't do it last year, we did it the year before last. Last year we had problems in clearing everything, getting everything cleared.
Right.
But we would like to continue this year, annually, every year.
If I could just add real quick too, is the fire department does it, they do it out here at the intersection when the light turns red. They do it, that's kind of the only difference.
Sure.
Well, we've got you guys all here. Could you get somebody, a volunteer, 1 or 2, to serve on the Veterans Memorial Committee?
On which?
The Veterans Memorial Committee, that's where we put the names of veterans that have enlisted from Oakland.
You got me in.
And it's up at the Memorial Hall, and that's the committee puts together, through research, to make sure that the person was honorably discharged and from Oakland when he ended the military branch of this
I'd be
church.
glad to do it.
Appreciate it.
One more question.
Sure.
Before you gentlemen leave, we have one more item on the agenda that you may be interested in. So if we could get you to relax for a second and get us through a couple more agendas before you all run out the door, that would be appreciated.
Sure.
Okay, awesome.
So motion is made, second by Mr. Bowman, all in favor? Thank you. Next thing, addressing Mr. J.J. Jurdak to address the council about required site survey for new homes.
Thank you.
How are you, sir?
Good evening, everybody. Good to see many of you. I don't know all of you, but I know some of you. I'm J.J. Jurdak. I've lived in Oakland since 1990. I currently reside down at Cedar Village Place in Oakland, one of Beverly Libby's rental cabins. We've kind of upgraded a little bit, and that's where we stay during the warm months. Back in October last year, the budding owner started clearing the site up above us. We live in the neighborhood between Libby Hill Road, Pond Road, and Andrews Terrace. A lot of homes in there, very nicely developed, and all the way to the lake. And this gentleman came in and started clearing, and before we realized that, we started wondering if he was on our property. And I got on an old survey Beverly had given me back in 1990 or whatever, before we bought there to look at it, and my wife and I went out to tape measure and we measured it. And he was on our property by about 50 feet by 200 feet. Cleared out trees as big as 18 inches in diameter. We contacted the Maine Forest Service. And they do have, it's the right word I'm looking for, fines, that they can assess on an owner who cuts trees on other people's property. And one of the examples that stuck with us was a $100 fine for an 18-inch in diameter tree. Now, if somebody can buy us for $100, an 18-inch diameter tree, and plant it, deliver it and plant it, we wouldn't be here today asking for this. I'm a frugal accountant. I don't spend a dime unless I can, and I always try to spend it so it's the right way to spend it. So I understand my request might prohibit some people or set them back a little bit. And in a developed neighborhood, do not require a survey. For people to go on their own property and not know what is their property was a surprise to me. I came down and spoke to both the town manager and the code enforcement officer and learned quite a bit that we don't need a survey to develop a piece of land in Oakland. And I understand an example, if I own 600 acres and I'm building on 2 acres of it, that may be kind of foolish. But these lots, there are only 2 vacant lots in that whole area I described. Both of them have been developed. One owner went out and got a survey and did it perfect. He abuts us on the east side, or the southeast side. This owner is on the northwest side. His attitude was, I was told I owned all the way to the road. He was about 40 feet shy of the road when we had our survey rechecked. And so my request isn't anything that I'm looking for an answer tonight. I know that there are processes and updates to town requirements that go on throughout the whole year. But I would like the council and the town to seriously consider requiring surveys before someone starts building on a piece of property that may or may not be theirs. That's all I have for tonight. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. If you don't, just tell me you'll think about it, and I'm good to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jurdak. Any questions? Any comments? Sir?
Just one question. You mentioned that you had some surveys that Bev Libby had done at one point,
Yes, Mike K.
and those are accurate? So
Well,
those delineate his property or just the
No,
boundary
just
line?
ours.
So
Right.
is that the boundary line that's in question?
Yes.
So there was an existing survey of that line, but they just didn't take the time to review it, examine it?
You know, I don't know.
No, I know, I
Question
just,
I don't, excuse me.
but at least there had been a survey at some point, but it obviously didn't affect them. They didn't look at it.
I don't think their property was ever surveyed. the abutting property, which we own, has been surveyed. And it stopped at their line. It didn't go any further north.
We talked with JJ prior to this, back at, what was it, maybe a month ago or 2 months ago, JJ? And we brought it in front of the council. I don't know if you recall, but what our code enforcement officer did was update the requirements, the verbal requirements that we ask for somebody who's going to build a site. And we've added that if the boundaries aren't established, then we're asking them to do a survey. We're not forcing them to do a survey. And the other thing is to show us a plot plan showing where the building is to be with a setback location, so we have an idea of where it is on the map. The other thing that Dave did was he contacted all of our surrounding towns, and there's not a town in the area that actually requires this. And not that that's right or wrong. My only concern, and I understand exactly where JJ's coming from on this, and you know, if I was a landowner who owned property and somebody stepped across my line and took some trees, I'd be pretty irate as well. But you take a young couple coming into a community to build a house, and a survey is going to cost them anywhere from $3,000 to $7,000. That's an additional cost to that construction that they may not have if they decided to go to a neighboring town. And that's my concern about it. Again, I understand, you know, I've owned several pieces of land over my lifetime, and I have accidentally stepped across the line at one occasion and grabbed trees that belong to somebody else. So I know on both sides of it. And I had my lines flagged out, and I just, the flagging was too far away, and I still crossed the line. So this is a different set of circumstances, but it can happen regardless if we require somebody to have a survey or not. I mean, there's always that chance of that happening. But that's just my position on it.
So this list we have here, that's what you require now, Dave?
It's not a requirement, it's what we try to get from everybody. It's more of a guide to go by, so if there's any question on where the lot lines are, that they provide that information so it's accurate. But yeah, that list was generated from the initial meeting we had this spring or whenever it was.
Yeah, but you say a survey if boundaries are not established.
Right.
You asked for it, yeah?
Sure.
It seems to me that'd be something on the deed that would say how many feet go which way and whatnot, and usually there's a pin at any given time when the deed is written up. This is just something that failed, sounds like.
Bob?
JJ, go back to the beginning of your talk. Do you own the piece of property or you rent it?
No, I own it,
You own it.
along with 8 co-owners. It's
So you have recourse against the person who cut your trees, legal recourse.
Through the state of Maine Forest Service.
Well, through hiring a lawyer and suing them.
We could do that.
Whether or not, the question is whether or not the effort is worth the cost. So,
Or is the effort more expensive than the survey would have been to that individual landowner? And Gary, I hear your numbers, 3,000 to 7,000. I'm stuttering. I find that hard to believe for a survey of a 1.5 acre lot in town property.
I'm using one of the low-end numbers for the survey that we just had completed on this 1 acre lot for the fire station. And it was actually $3,600.
Wow, I have no idea. We had our northeast line reestablished by a survey of $250. Now, granted, that wasn't the whole property.
Right.
The whole property is 5.5, almost 6 acres. So I have no clue what that would cost. If it's that much, I'm shocked. If it's not that much, then I stand by my request. And making this, now again, we're talking in town. You know, I mean, Gary had an appropriate example. If we're up in the middle of 700 acres and I want to build my house, do I really need a survey? But to have an in-town lot and be able to look at it from a code enforcement standpoint and determine that someone is complying with setbacks when you don't know where the property line is. I'm a bookkeeper, I don't know that, but that's like trying to come up with a balance when nobody gives me any numbers. How do I know that their setback is correct if I don't know where their property line is? If I'm supposed to be 100 feet, for example, from someone else's property line, how do I know I am without a survey? So again, I'm not trying to raise costs. I mean, I moved to Oakland 30 years ago because of the value I got from my dollar here. And I've never, ever regretted it. And I bought a second piece of property because I really like Oakland. And I sold the other one to someone who wanted to move to Oakland for the same reason. So I certainly am understanding and empathetic. But the response I got from the individual that cleared the lot after he said, I thought I owned all the way to the road. And I said, why didn't you clear all the trees all the way to the road? You left like 30 feet of buffer. So, you know, I hate to use the word bullshit, but I figured that's what I was getting fed. And then he said, well, my wife and I wanted to see the lake. And I said, my wife and I don't want to see your house. You know, I mean, and I didn't want to go that far. I stopped at that point. I really don't want to sue. If we take legal recourse to the Maine Forest Service, we get $1,400 for 22 trees. I don't want to even pay, well, I'll pay for delivery and probably half a dozen trees. And we're looking for 5-foot balsams, even though what he took down was some big stuff. So I hear what you're saying, Bob, but you know, there's 8 owners. We don't want to come up with 10 or 15 grand to sue them. I'd rather try to do something, excuse me, for the future. We'll deal with this on our own. I'm not asking for any help with that situation. We'll manage it. But if the surveys are that much, I'm really taken aback. I'll probably make a call to K&K tomorrow and the young man that did our survey and just ask to get an idea. If it is that much, I'll call Jan at the office or Gary and say, forget it.
So I'm just wondering if there's some other way other than requiring that person who wants to build something or tear something down to have a survey taken. I mean, if you already had a survey and it showed your property line, is this something that David or the town could have done referencing that? Somebody had a survey done, it just didn't happen to be the guy who cut the trees. And maybe that's something we could think about or look at.
Or we could